Malcolm X clawed his way up from obscurity and degradation to become an international spokesman for black aspirations and an angry radical in his own country. He made enemies as he rose, enemies who set out to destroy him. February 21st, 1965, the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, Minister Malcolm faced his audience. He also faced his assassins, and his death has been recorded.
Without any further ado, I bring before you the Minister Malcolm, and I pray that you and I will listen, hear, and understand. Thank you.
Salam alaikum. Hold it.
When you get past Malcolm, then you lose a lot of steam. You got a big vacuum, and then you hit just about rock bottom.
Malcolm X and what he stood for, I think one of his major contributions to the struggle has been the arousing the consciousness of being black. It's called negritude in French-speaking Africa. The consciousness of being black in the black people.
Malcolm X voiced the bitterness of Harlem and Watts, of the urban, slum-dwelling Negro. Assassins silenced Malcolm. Although the struggle for civil rights in the South captured public attention, the frustrations and hopes on which Malcolm built his following have not disappeared. The radicalism of the Southern civil rights movement has had growing nationwide sympathy. The justice of the cause was clear because Southern Negroes fought an open and arrogant enemy. The Northern Negro radical is more difficult to understand. His people are poor. They are second-class citizens. The harsh realities of the slum and racial exclusion make a mockery of equal opportunity. But the Northern Negro has no clear enemy, no white citizens' council, no Sheriff Clark. There is no line which once crossed brings the promise of victory and a better life. Not knowing what he must fight, the urban Negro loses hope in the fight itself. The black radical returns hope to his people. He substitutes for a clear enemy a proud cause. He has contempt for white America. He says that the Negro must fight the whole system. He emphasizes pride in being black, independent black political action. Some black radicals say that what the white man won't give, the Negro must take, if necessary by violence. Black radicalism has led to a debate within the Negro community. The issues are black nationalism, third-party political activity, and violence. The participants in this debate speak for themselves. Black Muslim leader, black supremacist, and Malcolm's first mentor, Elijah Muhammad.
God didn't make the white man that made us. The white man made just 6,000 years ago, and we was made unlimited. We don't know nothing about any birth record for us. You can't find no history that will give you the birth of the black man. He has always been.
Daniel Watts edits the radical black magazine Liberator in New York, the newest voice of the young black intellectual, a circulation of 15,000, a tough, aggressive voice of pride.
Let me put it to you this way. We are proud of being black and of our black heritage, but white America does not accept the concept that this is a multiracial society. It has never accepted the fact that there are black people, brown people, yellow people here alongside them. They've always looked upon America as being white, and hence all of its propaganda is directed at us to convince us that somehow or the other we must become white before they will accept us. Even a publication like Ebony, with a subscription of something like 800,000 Negro subscribers, is written for what we call the low visibility Negro. You know, the light-skinned Negro. With a rare exception, Ebony never features the activities of the black man in this country. It's always that low visibility, you know, the almost white Negro. And how you too can be this way one day if you use some of the skin lighteners that they run in their advertisement. I mean, when it runs ads like Dr. Fred Palmer's skin whiteners, it is denial of the fact that black people exist. That somehow or the other, in order for us to exist, we must resort to using hair straighteners so our hair won't be kinky, that somehow if we could only hide our blackness, we can then become part of this thing called the American melting pot or the American scene. This is the primary role that ebony and such publications serve.
This young man worked for CORE, worked for SNCC, lives in Watts, Los Angeles, is typical of the young intellectual Negro. Jimmy Garrett speaks of pride.
I think the problem is the standard for discussion is set by the whites, and a lot of Negroes now don't want to accept that standard anymore. They say, we're going to have our own standard. I think that the hookup comes if you can develop a whole new standard where whites and Negroes can have a dialogue. Not either one of those are acceptable anymore. I mean, whites aren't going to accept Negro standards, and Negroes no longer want to be white, so that the clear thing is to develop a whole new standard, and then everybody move toward that so there can be some kind of dialogue.
Julian Bond of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He speaks of pride.
Well, a great many people in SNCC and a great many people in the Negro community in general have feelings of nationalism, of black nationalism. And the disturbing thing to me is a great many Americans, white Americans, seem to equate this with the same sort of white supremacy that flows from the Ku Klux Klan and the Citizens Council and so on. And I don't think it's quite the same thing. I think what black nationalists are saying is that Negro Americans have their own history and their own heritage to be proud of, and it's a heritage and a history that the rest of the country must recognize. And I don't think it's any more than that, and I think it's something that Negroes have to be made more aware of, is their history of participation as American citizens and as against the form of American life that has oppressed them, and I think it's a beneficial thing rather than a detrimental thing.
Fannie Lou Hamer, a founder of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. She speaks of pride.
You know, from a child up, I always, at first, I wanted to be white, you know, because my family was 20 of us, 6 girls and 14 boys. We would make 50 and 60 bales of cotton, gather all that cotton, and we wouldn't have food in the wintertime. So I figured then the white people must be right. But as I got older, I said, no, it's something wrong. And if I ever get a chance, I'm going to do something about it. But year after year, things look like got worse and worse. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee helped to build confidence in people that they was just about to lose all hopes. And that's the truth.
Black radicals seek equality in different ways. Julian Bond sought it at the polls. Elected to the Georgia legislature, he was refused a seat because he opposes the Vietnam War. Bond describes his work with SNCC.
Well, it's an organization of about 200 young people, mostly young people, college and university age young people, white and Negro from all across the country, who try to do several things. Number one, we try to encourage Southern Negroes to register to vote, but even more basic than that, we try to organize people in the rural parts of the Deep South into groups that can make use of those votes as Negroes gradually achieve the right to vote.
Well, we go in and live with people, live in their homes, work with the people, try to get them aroused to the point where they lose some of their fears. We have to cut across generational fear.
And we hope someday that we will have developed across the South several what we call pockets of power that Negroes can use to gain a measure of independence and can use to force some changes in the American system to make their lives a little better.
It was only SNCC. SNCC and CORE worked with us day and night. You would be surprised when SNCC came into Mississippi the 14th of August of 1962. The first conference, I went to a SNCC conference in Nashville, Tennessee in November 1962. And the first time I had a chance to just sit next to a white person, I've never been that nervous in my life. And they told us, you know, they didn't tell us what to say. Say, you know how you've been getting along in Mississippi. We don't have to tell you. Say what you feel.
The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, one of the established civil rights organizations, made its reputation in the South. The Reverend Andrew Young of SCLC.
Presently, we're engaged in 2 major programs. One is a voter registration program in the state of Alabama, which is involving 31 counties and so far 2 of the major cities, and we'll probably expand to about 5 major cities in the next 2 months. The key to this is that we think by transforming the political structure, simply through the adding of Negroes to the voting rolls, we will accomplish a certain political reform across the South.
The civil rights movement, by and large, has been the almost exclusive property of the old coalition that was formed by Roosevelt, labor, the white liberal establishment, et cetera, with a few showcase Negroes up front. But by and large, it has certainly not affected the bulk of the black people in this country, the grassroots people. This is where the liberator hopes to make inroads into the sort of uncommitted black person, which I would say probably comprises something like 75% of the black population in this country. These are the people who cannot identify, let's say, with the Whitney Youngs, the Martin Luther Kings, or the Roy Wilkins, because these people, these so-called leaders, represents the black Anglo-Saxon establishment, and they do not speak for the soul brother in the street.
I never will forget, Mr. Wilkins came to me one day from the NAACP that I found out at that national convention was the National Association for the Advancement of Certain People, but it didn't include us in Mississippi. And he came to me and told me, he said, "You people are ignorant, you don't know anything about politics, you put your print over, why don't you pack up and go home?" Well, at that time, I imagined that he was being pressured.
I think Martin Luther King is the logic of the Negro leader, and he's trying to get Negroes into the middle class, the body politic, which ultimately is to get them into the mainstream of American life. Now, Malcolm said there was something wrong with the mainstream of American life, and there was something wrong with not getting in there. Why get in the middle of a cesspool? That's my own attitude.
There is no white man in America today can go to Washington and give the so-called American Negro equal rights. He can't do it.
Or in terms
he can promise it to him, but he have his own people to contend with. Equal rights will mean giving some earth too. You can't be equal by living on the white man's soil. This is his country. Why should you be deceived by a president or a candidate for president saying he will give you equal rights when you can't get no equal rights? No fully equal rights is here for you unless they are going to do this. Give to you some portion of the country and give to you the rights to set up your own government for yourself and your own people, since that by nature you are different.
There's not enough black people in this country to talk about setting up a little hill out there. Well, in a day or two, the people could blow us off the face of the map, So I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about in terms of a better and a greater world for all people. And we can't do that by me in one corner doing what I can do to hurt you and you in the other corner doing the same thing against me.
I think that in the process of being absorbed into it, we're going to have to change it. For instance, we're trying to integrate into the political system, but we're not integrating into the political system of James Eastland and Strom Thurmond. That when we get the right to vote, the James Eastlands and the Strom Thurmonds will have to go, because the first thing we'll do is vote them out of office. So that means that as we come in as a power factor in American life, certain changes will take place in the structure of the American economy and the American political system, which will be advantageous not just to the Negro, but to the whole political system.
The reason we have a Mississippi Freedom Democrat Party, we wasn't allowed to participate with the regular Democratic Party in Mississippi. We tried from the precinct level to go with the regular Democrats. I'll never forget when we went to visit the precinct meeting in Roosevelt. It was 8 of us, 8 Negroes. And we went up to this polling place where they would hold precinct meetings, and they had this place closed. It was locked up. So we stood at the nearest place, which was right down by the steps, on the lawn, and we held our own precinct meeting. We elected our chairman, our secretary, our delegates, and our alternates, and we passed a loyalty resolution. And we moved from the precinct level up to the state. Then on the 24th of April, 24th or 6th of April, 1964, the Mississippi Freedom Democrat Party was organized at the Masonic Temple in Jackson, Mississippi.
The Progressive Labor Party and its candidate Bill Epton, myself.
Bill Epton was a candidate of the Mao Communist Progressive Labor Party. Epton ran legally in Harlem, but somehow his name, or lever, was missing on 2/3 of the polling machines in his district. Experiences like these support the assertion of many black radicals that the vote is a sham.
The unemployment among the black people, the Puerto Rican people, and the white workers increases. The slum conditions get worse. Police brutality continues. And everything that we need and we demand and we never get from the Democrats and the Republicans.
Let us take Harlem for an example. Lindsay and the whole motley crew from downtown come running up to Harlem during the election to promise jobs, housing, public housing, schools, and hospitals. And the black people, unfortunately, bought Lindsay this time on this. But no one in the black community asked Lindsay, if you take these slum buildings off the tax roll and replace it with non-taxable buildings such as schools and hospitals, where is that money going to come from to build these hospitals and schools? And this is precisely why they won't build any more hospitals or any more schools or public housing, because you're taking off the tax rolls these slum buildings and replacing them with non-taxable structures.
That thing about slavery with a smile, if you got to have slaves, call them free men and give them the vote. So you can control people. If you determine their choices for them, then it doesn't matter whether they vote or not. Because if you choose between a person who's going to stab you 5 times in the heart and a person going to stab you 4 times in the heart, what kind of choice is that? So you go ahead and vote. So what? So you vote for a senator, and the senator's constituency is either lobbyists who represent big business, or lobbyists who represent himself. So what? So you can vote.
I am interested in developing a third political all-black party. Once we in the black community can establish our political party, then we can negotiate with our so-called white allies who have developed their own political party simultaneously along with us. Then from the standpoint of power and interest, we can negotiate fairly and squarely. We wouldn't be hung up with all the euphemisms of such as brotherhood, and it's the moral thing to do.
If we had a chance to run for office in Mississippi, and in some districts in Mississippi we have a chance to have Negroes in power, but I wouldn't want a black power structure in Mississippi, just like I'm against an all-white power structure. We want good people, regardless of they white or black, to represent the people of Mississippi. See, I'm not concerned about just representing black people, because we have poor white that's in the same category with the poor Negro. Well, I want to see a change for the people. And if we can get a good white man, all right, we'll put him in office. But I don't want it all black and I don't want it all white.
What we need to do today is to develop black institutions so that the whole movement, the black liberation movement, does not depend on any single individual, but depends upon an institution. We're so bad off that we don't even have an ideology for our revolution. We don't even have one black economist, not one black theoretician who can sit down and say, this is the program, this is what we're going to follow. Something on the order of the American Jewish Committee or the American Jewish Congress, except that it would be black instead of it being white. An institution that's up front analyzing, making proposals in terms of course of actions, lobbying, etc., for black people, not hung up on this business of integration, whatever that means. If we look at the whole question of the black people, realistically, some kind of a dole would have to set up. In other words, given the rapid advancement of the technology in the country today, every black child over 10 is already obsolete in terms of the needs and demands of the technology. So some kind of dole system would have to be set up where we would be supported for the rest of our lives while all of the efforts concentration in terms of education, motivation be placed on the black children between the ages of 1 and 10, so that they will have the equipment to enter into the technology that's America. Now, that's one aspect. Another aspect would be a guaranteed annual wage. This can only come from central planning in Washington. It cannot come from this freewheeling, profit-making economy. It has to come from a central planning agency in Washington, a guaranteed annual wage. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of shuffling of papers. But in terms of the plight of the black man in this country, there's been no perceptible change. Primarily because the white man has no reason to. He enjoys the highest standard of living. His government enjoys dominance in world affairs. Why should he turn to me now and say, I want to share part of my good fortune with you? He has no reason to. And I think it reminds me of, the, you know, when we were kids. The boy with all the marbles is not going to change the rules of the game. So it is up for us, the black people now, to force the whites to change the rules of the games.
Part of the radical tactic has been violence. There are many attitudes about violence among the black radicals. Julian Bond.
Well, we are a nonviolent organization, and that means that some of our members believe in nonviolence as a philosophy and a way of life, and some of us believe in it as a tactic and a technique. But over the past 5 years, we have tried to carry out all of our activities in a nonviolent manner. Now, the people in the general civil rights movement who believe in violence, unfortunately, serve a very good function because they scare white people into doing things at our demand that they would not do otherwise. In other words, I think a group like the Muslims says to white America in general that if you don't deal with Martin Luther King today, then you must deal with us tomorrow. And most people would rather deal with Martin Luther King than deal with the Muslims.
Liberator magazine predicted the Watts riot in Los Angeles 2 months before it occurred. Writer and editor Daniel Watts.
I was there in February of this year, and unlike white missionaries that go into the black ghetto, who go into the periphery of the black ghetto and look for a Negro, respectable one, respectable looking, I spent most of my time in the foggy bottom bars, the funky bars, where the soul brothers are, talking to the brothers and sisters, and really finding out what they were thinking. And this was why we were able to predict what was going to happen in Watts. The so-called trained sociologists, the poll takers, and above all, that blight on the backs of black people, the white missionaries, they could never get into the soul brother town in that fashion.
Even guys on the blocks who are talking mean and hostile, you ask them, well, really, what are you mad about? What do you want? See? What are you fighting for? They say, well, they want jobs, they want education, they want to be respected as individuals. Well, if you want a policeman to respect you, do you kill him, or do you cuss him out, or do you find some way to creatively respond to him in love so that he responds in respect? If you want a job with a factory, does it make sense to burn that factory down? Or is it more effective in terms of getting what you want to go to the manager of that factory and apply the kinds of moral and economic pressures that are necessary to get him to open up the doors and give you a job in that factory? And I think we've been finding, say, among the street gangs in Chicago, that when they see nonviolence presented as an aggressive action philosophy for social change, they can readily see that this makes a whole lot more sense than throwing a Molotov cocktail in a liquor store.
Let us take a look at Harlem, 1964, when approximately 20 Molotov cocktails were exploded in Harlem. And in 1965, in August, in Watts, Los Angeles, 2,000 Molotov cocktails were exploded. I think that we are developing more sophistication, and I think in the next uprising, and I suspect it will probably come either in Washington, D.C. or in another unnamed city, where you're going to find 5,000 Molotov cocktails used.
Well, I've never thought in terms of violence, of all the things that have been gained by people fighting and going through blood for it. They don't have anything, This, to me, it doesn't make sense. If I hate you because you hate me, I'm no better than you are. And all we want to do is to make these people understand that we are human beings and we can work together in this country. And to have a democracy, that's what we're going to have to do.
I think there's going to be violence, see, because there already has been. I mean, when people try to free themselves, they kill Negroes in the South all the time. The Negro man has been emasculated and destroyed by the fact that every time he stood up, he got just snuffed out right there. So I don't think there's any question but that there's going to be violence and brutality. But my attitude is that the brutality and the violence shouldn't become the reason that you want to be free. But that's a very personal thing, the freedom is. See, the question isn't what is freedom to me, it's what price freedom. Because sometimes the price that you pay for freedom is the very thing that makes you a slave again. That's what I think happened in Russia in 1917. But I know that there's going to be violence. I mean, I think it gets blurred, especially the individual. If I face you violently, see, who knows where that violence began? See, I mean, if I face you with a gun and I got orders to kill you and you got orders to kill me, then we can't really deal with each other. Well, you're a target and I'm a target. So you can't really talk about that. But you can talk about the larger thing, the much more universal thing. The reason that you're there, see, is really not to kill, but to free.
Freedom. Freedom now. Real freedom. An ideal from our political heritage, an ideal on which both moderate and radical Negroes are agreed. But many Negroes are not really free to direct their lives toward fulfilling work. Many Negroes are not really free to be proud of themselves and their race. If federal, state, and local action is able to guarantee these freedoms, the grievances on which black radicalism is based will have been met. If not, the black radicals will speak for an ever-growing segment of the Negro community.
Next week on The Radical Americans, we look at the tradition of radicalism in the United States.